that was the Gemara's question. There's no such thing that you have two Mishnayot, that you have one Mishnah following another Mishnah that are repeating the same thing. Obviously, each Mishnah is coming to share something new that was not in the previous Mishnah. So the Gemara wanted to know, what is the difference between Mishnah number 1 and Mishnah number 2? Because our Mishnah speaks about the argument whether you could use boards for Succah, and we present the argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, and we already had that argument before, whether you could use boards for Succah. Their argument was already mentioned earlier. So the Gemara wanted to know, what is the contribution? What is the novelty? What is the newness that you're coming to add with our Mishnah? That was the Gemara's question. So the Gemara, so Rav Chia bar Abba wanted to say that the first Mishnah is talking about, it's not talking about a board that's, let's say, 4 tefach board. It's talking about, let's say, a board that's not the issue of worrying about interchanging that board. You know, if you're going to allow that board for your sukkah, you're going to allow the board of your house. You're going to allow the boards of your house. People make a mistake and think you can sit under the boards of your ceiling of your house. Rather, we're talking about boards that were smooth. You smooth them out. Now, when you smooth them out, they have some use. It could be used for, it has some use as is, once it's smoothed out. So it has some resemblance of a utensil. Now, what's the issue? The issue is, we know that utensils are makabel tumah. Utensils, things that are used for, as a utensil. Let's say something that has a receptacle, something you could put something inside of something. Certain things, utensils have a status of tumah. See, a flat piece of wood is generally not considered a utensil. It's not usable as a flat piece of wood. Not usable as a flat piece of wood. Doesn't receive contamination. But once you smoothed it out, so now it has certain use in this state. Once it's smooth, it's a nice smooth piece of wood. You could use it for certain uses, let's say, but you still haven't yet designated for certain uses. But the fact that it resembles at this stage, when it's smoothed out, it resembles a utensil. So people might say, if you could use that smooth piece of wood for your Succah, you're going to come to use a real utensil for Succah. A real utensil for Succah would be invalid, because the real utensil is makabel tumah, is susceptible to contamination. So therefore, the argument beforehand is, do we make a gezerah? Do we make a decree and say that even though the piece of wood is still not worthy of contamination, because it's still wood, it's still a flat piece of wood, but since it resembles something that is worthy of contamination, will people make a mistake and say, if you could use that, then I could use that? That is the question. Or you'll say, maybe people know that wood, flat piece of wood, whether it's flat, whether it's smooth or not smooth, people won't make a mistake between other utensils. They'll know flat piece of wood works for Succah, and utensils don't work. Will people make a mistake or not? So that's the argument over there. The argument over there is a specific, unique situation when the wood was smoothed out, and the issue there is, do we make a mistake with other utensils or not? But our Mishnah here on Tezvav is not talking about the smoothed out piece of wood. It's talking about a piece of wood. It's a raw piece of wood, but it is 4 tefachim wide. It has a certain width to it, which the question is, that issue is, are you going to interchange that wood for the ceiling of your house? And if you say you could use that, then you could use the ceiling house. That's what the Gemara wants to wants to say, is that the two different cases of the two different arguments of Rabbi Yehuda and Meir arguing in two different situations. One is when it's a smooth board with its possible concern, and one was the regular smooth board, even though it does not have, it's not the issue of size, doesn't resemble the ceiling of your house, but it resembles utensils. The other dispute is a board that resembles the ceiling of your house. Would we create a injunction, if that's the right word? I don't know if the lawyer has to tell me that will make it forbidden because we're afraid of interchanging. So that's what the Gemara wants to say. Is that clear, everybody? Okay. So to that, the Gemara challenges this approach. The Gemara says down on 15.8.2 on the right side, middle of the page. Well, the Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, the Gemara says, you have it, Mr. Batesh? Yehuda Amarav, you got it? On 15.8.2, it's the second paragraph where it says the Gemara rejects this explanation, right? Adam, you got it? Right. Now, Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. Yehuda Amarav, the Amma, he said, Succah b'chitzin. If, let's say, you went ahead and you took, let's say there's the arrow, and then there's the front of the arrow, the metal part of an arrow, and there's the wooden part of the arrow, right? And the wooden piece, let's say, handle, stick, goes into the metal, right? So sometimes you make the wooden stick, you put the hole, you make it at the end of the wooden stick, you have a hole, and that hole, or let's say you have a hole, and then you put the metal part into that hole of the wooden stick. And sometimes there's no hole at the end of the wooden stick, and rather the hole is in the metal front of the arrow, and you put the stick into that hole. So sometimes the wooden stick is made, sometimes they call one a male stick, where there's no hole in the stick, and sometimes it's a female stick where there's a hole in the stick. If the hole is in the stick, it's called a female, and therefore it receives. It's like a container. It contains the head of the arrow, and if it's the male, it doesn't contain the head of the arrow. It's just placed into the head of the arrow. Okay, so now we know a wooden item that's able to receive, able to contain, to hold something. That's when a wooden item will be considered susceptible to contamination. When it's flat, because it doesn't contain something, when it's flat, warning max, it's not susceptible to contamination. So now the question is, so if you're going to use these wooden parts of an arrow, so the harim, the wooden part of an arrow, let's see, we're talking about it's no longer, it's not connected to the front of the arrow. You never talking about just a plain piece of wood that has the ability to be connected to it's made that should be connected to the front of an arrow, to the metal part, but it's not connected to the metal. So that's the question, Max. There's this wooden part. Can I use this wooden piece as schach? So obviously, so the Gemara is saying, so the Gemara says if it's made from, if the hole is in the wooden stick, so that everybody would agree you cannot use that part. You know, I'm in the manufacturing business, and I'm manufacturing wood part of that goes into the arrow. So the male woods that we call the male woods or let's say talk about the female woods, I will not be able to use for schach, because the female means this wood has a hole in the wood, and and you put the head into that hole. Therefore, it's a container. We consider it like a container, and I cannot use that. But the question is, can I use the male wooden stick? The male wooden stick does not contain. Nothing goes into that stick. The stick goes into the front of the arrow, the metal of the arrow. Nothing goes into that stick. So do we say that we're going to make a gzera? Do we say we'll make a gzera, a decree, and say that if you're going to allow the male wood to be used for schach, people will make a mistake and they'll think they could also use the female type of wooden stick. So what? So the Gemara says, but according to Rabbi Yehuda Marav, he's of the opinion if you went ahead and you made the schach out of these arrow, the wooden arrow part of the arrow. If you use the male part, the male wood, if it's a male wooden part, shera, it's kosher because it's not doesn't contain. Because if it's a male wood, it's not that has no hole. When the kavos, but if it's a female, it's psula. By the way, the word nekeva, which depicts a female, the word nekeva is nakev. There's a hole. That's what the word nakev means, a hole. The nekevos, psula. Good morning, Ellie. If it's nekevos, it's pasul. If the wooden handle has a hole in it, it's pasul. And Logaza, Rav was not concerned. Zechorim atu nekevos. He was of the opinion we don't make a gzera. We don't say that you can't use the male wooden handle of an arrow because if you're going to use a male, you're going to come use the female. Hachinami lo nigza nisarim mishupim atu kelim. If so, too, we shouldn't be concerned to say that if you're going to use smooth boards that are smooth, people will make a mistake between smooth boards and utensils. And they'll say, if you can use a smooth, flat, wooden board for schach, they're going to say you could also use utensils, something that's a real utensil for schach. Rav is not concerned between something which is much closer, I would think. I mean, this is, in a certain sense, you might say, they're both handles for an arrow. The only difference is this handle has the hole, this handle doesn't have a hole. And Rav says, we're not concerned. People know. People will be careful and say, I know this type of item is kosher for schach, doesn't have a hole, it's the male handle. And they won't make a mistake between the female handle and the male handle. They know. They know that difference. If they know that difference, these two items, they definitely know the difference between a flat piece of wood that's smooth, even though it's smooth, they'll know that since it's wood, it's they won't interchange that with a real type of utensil. Because the issue over there is also interchanging utensils. There it's interchanging a wooden thing that has a hole and not a hole, and the issue is one is a utensil, one has the status of a wooden utensil, one has the status not of a wooden utensil. The one that has a hole in it is considered a wooden utensil. One doesn't have has not considered a wooden utensil. And over there he says people know that this wooden utensil is fine. It's a problem. And this one is not a problem. The same way that people on top of their game, they're on top of their game to know that this wooden utensil that has a hole in it is no good, and they'll be careful between that type of utensil and a flat wooden utensil. So they'll also be careful between a flat wooden smoothed out piece of wood and a real utensil. They seem to be knowledgeable not to make the mistake. So the Gemara says, Ella, the Gemara goes back to the drawing board. Morning, Yehuda. We are on 15A2 on the right bottom. What the Gemara is trying to do over here, morning, Simon. What the Gemara is trying to do is we have a question. We have two Mishnayot. Both Mishnayot seem to be saying the same thing. The underlying point of the Mishnayot is that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir argue, can you use a board for your schach, a board, let's say that's four tvachim wide board, according to one understanding, do we say that we'll interchange, we'll make a mistake, that if you use a board for your schach, you're building a sukkah and use a board, the sarim, you're going to come to use the boards of your roof, that of your house. That was the question. Do we make a gezerah? Are we concerned that if people make a mistake and say, if I can use this board for my sukkah, I'll use the same board. I can use at my house boards. I can sit in my house for sukkah as long as I'm under a board, and that's not kosher because it's not made as for a sukkah. So are people going to make that mistake or not? So we have Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir argue about that. And then we have it on Yudalet on 14a. And on 15a, we have again the same, seems to be the same argument. And that's the Gemara's question. What is the novelty? What is the newness? What is the second Mishnah coming to add that we already don't have in the first Mishnah? So to that, the Gemara now says like this. El al korchach. Yehuda, you got it? El al korchach reisha pligi gezeres tikra. The reisha, they're arguing about being concerned for interchanging if you allow your sukkah to be made, your schach, your covering made out of boards, maybe you'll make a mistake in your will you make a mistake in your house, using your house, ceiling boards. Sefer pligi, and also the sefer pligi v'gzeres tikra. They both, the first Mishnah and the second Mishnah, both concerned about tikra, about ceiling, interchanging ceilings. The iflagi b'tarati similomli. So why would you need to argue twice? You don't need to argue in the same thing twice, right? That's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara says the following: this is what the Sefer is coming to explain. The Sefer is coming to explain the give and take, the backwards and forwards, the conversation between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir regarding this dispute. Meaning the first Mishnah on Yudalet, the Mishnah was very concise. It just said, Rabbi Meir says you can't use boards, and Rabbi Yehuda says you could use boards. That was the basic gist of that. You could use boards for your schach, or you can't. They argue on that. Comes our Mishnah and elaborates the background discussion between the rabbis on their conclusion, on their law, what they said. There was a give and take. There was a discussion among them. There was more than just, it wasn't just this rabbi said you could use boards, and that rabbi says you can't use boards. There was a give and take, and the Gemara the Mishnah wants to open us up to their, call it Masa Matan, their discussion that they had among themselves, how each one presented their understanding of maybe Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel in this matter, and that would formulate their opinion. Because remember, Beis Hillel is the man that most people would want to follow at the end of the day, because Beis Hillel, the law follows Beit Hillel. So they're going to be, we're going to see how each one is going to try to explain how their opinion is in agreement with Beit Hillel. So let's see, or how one will challenge the other rabbi by saying, hey, how could you say what you come to your conclusion when Beit Hillel says differently than what you're saying? And you can't just go ahead and go at Beis Shammai and leave Beit Hillel in the dark, because Beit Hillel is the man that the halacha will follow, and you're interested in following the halacha, because generally the law follows Beit Hillel. So here comes the discussion. Sefer, the case of the Sefer. Now we're turning the page on the English. You are now Tesvav Mabruk. You're on 15a3. Sefer, the Gemara says, it goes like the Sefer. Rabbi Yehuda de Kama le Rameya. Rabbi Yehuda says to Rameya, Yehuda challenges Rameya's opinion. He says, Amai ka'asarat ben esarim. Why do you forbade using boards for your schach? What's your concern? They're flat boards. They're not mekabel tumah. They don't receive contamination because they're flat wood. They originally came from the ground. So therefore, it's already detached from the ground. It meets the requirement of kosher schach. So what's the issue? Why can't I use this flat board? So, on my cast of concern, Rabbi Yehuda says to Rameya, why do you forbade what's your concern about the boards? What's the problem? So your concern is Mishum Zerat Tikra. I know what's itching you. I know what's bothering you. I know what your concern is. You're afraid that if you're going to use this board for your schach, even though it's technically meets the requirement of kosher schach, then people are going to think, because these boards are the same size as the boards we use for our ceiling for our house. And people are going to make a mistake and say, if I could use that board for your sukkah, for your ceiling, for your schach, for your sukkah, you're going to use your boards of your house. But high svara, that logic, that concern is Beis Shammai who did it. Beis Shammai has that concern. But Beit Hillel lo gazri. Beit Hillel says there's no problem. Now, where did he see that Beit Hillel says there's no problem? That's how our Mishnah presented that Rabbi Yehuda, and if you look at our Mishnah, the top of Tesvav Amar Aleph, top of 15a, the Mishnah talks about a case where you have a ceiling that was made for a house. It was not plastered yet. And Rabbi Yehuda, and now you want to go ahead and make this ceiling kosher for sukkah. I want to transform this structure that was made for the intention of a ceiling of a house, and I want to make it kosher for sukkah. So Rabbi Yehuda reports that there's a dispute between Beis Shammai and Beit Hillel on what needs to be done to get this in shape. And he reports that Beit Hillel says, you know what you got to do? Either you move every board, every board of this ceiling that was made for a home, you move every board, or you remove some of the boards and you put kosher schach in and you create new schach. But the fact that Beit Hillel says you have an option of just moving every board, just lifting it up and putting it down, and using it as your sukkah schach, it's clear that Beit Hillel says there's no problem. People are not going to make a mistake to say, if you use these boards for your schach, for sukkah purposes, you're going to interchange them with the boards of your house. Because he says you're actually allowed to keep these boards that was made originally for your ceiling of your house, and you can use it for a sukkah schach. So it's clear that Beit Hillel is not concerned. People know that you can't use the boards of your house, of your ceiling of your house for schach. If something that's made, meaning if it's made for a house, people know that you have to make your sukkah. You have to go ahead and you can't use boards that were made for your house. No one's going to think you come to sit in your house for sukkah. They know, but if you go ahead and for sukkah, you have to go ahead and something has to be not something that was used for my house. So therefore,
so the fact that they just move it and thinking that now we're going to use it for the start.
That's good enough. And people are not going to make a mistake, because people know you had to do that. You had to go ahead and move it around. So people know that you can't just use your regular normal boards of your house ceiling. They see that you had to move the boards in order for it to be kosher for you to use for sukkah. So they're not going to say, I could use my house boards, because my house boards would never move. I never moved them. They're still my house. So no one's going to make a mistake to think that if I could use the boards the same board, I just moved it. And Beis Hillel says it's not a problem. Beis Hillel is not concerned, because Beis Hillel says people know that you have to the ceiling has to be moved and made for the purpose of a sukkah, for purpose of shade. Yes. Right. So excellent. So Beis Hillel says, some understand, Beis Hillel, like Rashi says, good morning. You actually have, when Beis Hillel says you move the boards, that means you get rid of the nails. You take the nails out. And that's good enough. And people won't make a mistake. I mean, maybe that could be also part of the logic what Mr. Batesh maybe is saying. Maybe people see you have to take apart the boards. You have to actually take the nails out. So people are not going to. So Beis Hillel holds we're not going to make a mistake that if you could use those boards that you actually took the nails and you moved. And the way Rashi learns, two things have to happen. The way some understand Rashi, you have to take out the nails and move the boards. So people are not going to think I can use my regular boards of my ceiling of my house. They see that there's much more involved. So Beis Hillel says you're good by just moving you could use those boards. So why are you concerned? So that's what Rabbi Yehuda says to Rav Meir. Rabbi Meir, why are you saying you can't use boards for schach? We see that Beis Hillel says you could use boards for schach. That's what our Mishnah is showing us, the conversation, the debate, the discussion between the rabbis in explaining their opinion. That's the novelty of our Mishnah, because the previous Mishnah, we just have the bottom line. Yehuda says you could use a board for your schach. It didn't give us what his source for his reasoning was. Didn't identify his source, why he held that way. And therefore, our Mishnah identifies his source. And that's important to know. It's a new thing that we didn't know in the previous Mishnah. Just a continuation from the previous Mishnah, but it's something new. So now, High Svara Rabbi Shabu this, Beitila Gazri. Beitila doesn't make Gzeirah. So Amar Rameya, what does Rameya shoot back? Rameya says, Lo nechleku Beishamai Beitila B'davar said. You're making a mistake. You're understanding, you're reporting that Beis Hillel says that we don't make a Gzeirah. You could just take apart the boards, move the boards, and you're good. I disagree. I think you're making a mistake in your understanding of Beit Hillel's opinion. Beit Hillel agrees that you cannot just unlock the boards and move the boards, and that'll be good enough. He does agree that there is a concern of if you're going to use those boards for your schach, you're going to come to use the boards of your house. So therefore, cannot use, Meir says, you cannot use the boards you can't use boards for schach, because Meir says you're going to make the mistake. Okay. By the way, our minhag is we don't use boards lahalacha. L'maaseh, our customers, we don't, even though technically it would seem that the halacha would only forbade a 4 tefach wide board. If it's less than 4 tefachim, it should be good. But today the Shulchan Aruch says we don't use it, and some say that today you can't use it because today there's a real me'ika hadin, meaning it's more than just a custom that we can't use it, but because today it's common to make a ceiling of your house from boards that are even less than 4 tefach wide, so then it becomes the real issue. I mean, the same way in the old days, the concern was only a 4 tefach wide board, because that was the board size of a board that people would use for a ceiling of your house. Today, where they use a board less than the ceiling, they make ceilings from boards that are less than 4 tefachim, so therefore there will be an equally concern from a ceiling that's from schach, that if it's a board. So therefore that's why we don't use boards. That's why you see what do we use? We use bamboo, we use all these. You don't see anybody using these small boards and putting small boards for your schach. Okay, so now the Gemara continues. Hanicha. Now our Mishnah spoke about, our Mishnah talks about a ceiling that doesn't have plaster, right? That's how a Mishnah speaks about it. The ceiling that doesn't have plaster, meaning you have boards, right? You put boards on your house, and what do you do? But you didn't put the plaster yet. And now, but since you placed the boards for the purpose of a house, it's not, you can't use that for a sukkah. Something has to be done, right? Either you have to take some boards out, put some schach, or some say it's just enough to move each and every board for the purpose of sukkah. So now let's focus on that opinion. Beit Hillel says you just have to move each board. Just move each board, untie the boards, take the nails out, move each board, and that's good enough. It's as if you're creating the sukkah new. You look at movement of each board, it's like you're making the sukkah fresh now, right? And he's not concerned that you're going to make a mistake and think that if you could use these boards for a sukkah, you could use the boards of your house. You could use the ceiling boards of your house for a sukkah. He's not concerned. Now, what is the average, when you talk about a house, if you're talking about a house ceiling, the normal house ceiling boards was 4 tfachim. That was a normal house ceiling board. With that background, if the normal house ceiling board is 4 tfachim, and Beit Hillel says, and Beit Hillel is on record, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Beit Hillel is on record and he says there's no problem with using those boards as long as you move those boards. Then now it's not made anymore for a house. Morning, Mr. Silverman. We are on 15A3. As long as you move those boards, you're good. So we see he has no concern. He has no problem of using boards for schach, even boards that are 4 tefach wide boards. Okay, is that clear? This premise. The Mishnah is talking about a case of a normal ceiling boards. Normal ceiling boards of a house are how wide? 4 tefach wide. And Rabbi Yehuda reports in the Mishnah, they can be used for schach. As long as you moved it around, you can use it for schach. Now previously, we had a dispute between Rav and Shmuel in exactly what is the case that Rabbi Yehuda is lenient. Does Rabbi Yehuda say, is Rabbi Yehuda's leniency only in a case when the board is not 4 tefach wide? That's what Rabbi Yehuda says you could use a 3 to 4 tefach board, but a 4 tefach board, Rabbi Yehuda would say you cannot use. Or Rabbi Yehuda is even permitting a 4 tefach wide board. He's not concerned of board at all, even if it's a 4 tefach wide board. The fact that the Mishnah is talking about the standard board is a 4 tefach wide board. And yet Rabbi Yehuda says you could still use it for what? For schach. So we see clearly that Rabbi Yehuda's allowance of using a board extends not just to a board of a 3 to 4 tefach wide board, even a 4 tefach wide board. And that's only in agreement with one of the later rabbis' understanding of the dispute, not the other rabbis' understanding. Eli, is that clear? And that's what the Gemara now is going to challenge. Is going to discuss. Hanicha, everything what we just said is good. L'Rav, the Ummah, Rav who said machloket b'yesh b'm abba. Rav who said that he understood that the argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir is even is by boards that are 4 tefach wide boards, and Rabbi Yehuda says it's even good then. The Rabbi Meir itli gezerah tikra. Rabbi Meir has the concern if you use a 4 tefach wide board for your sukkah, you're going to come and sit in your house for a sukkah. You're going to sit under the boards of your house for a sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda letli gezerah tikra. If Yehuda is not concerned, even a 4 tefach white board, he says, don't worry, people are not going to mistake that if you can use a 4 tefach white board for a sukkah, and you're going to go ahead and use the inside of your house ceiling, people won't make such a mistake. And Shmuel, yes, Mr. Vitesse.
Distinguishing between using the house boards
there a pitch roof with shingles on it?
Right, but yeah, the pitch roof that what, that has what? We're talking about that, are we afraid that you're gonna,
Are you taking the boards and putting them somewhere else? And
The-
using the boards that same.
the concern is that people, not everybody learned the Gemara Sukkah. Not every Jew was so educated. And therefore, because people not Jewish, you have to remember, so the rabbis are concerned for some of the Jews that are not so educated. They come into a sukkah, they look up and they say, "Look, I see the size board matches the board I have in my house."
What is there? But are they taking boards from the movement that house? Or they're using that same room?
The concern is they'll actually use their actual room that has these boards.
Can't just have.
Yeah, but let's say if you have let's say first of all, if you have a flat roof.
Rain's gonna come through the boards.
Okay, but they see if I could use this for my sukkah, they look at the sukkah. I'm in my sukkah. I look up. Wow, I got boards. They're good. I come to my house. Hey, they're the same size. So people will make, perhaps is a concern. That's the issue. Are we going to make the mistake? I can use the inside of my house. You know, a person's going to say, as long as I'm under boards, under some sort of cover. So that's I won't eat my sandwich outside in the street, outside in the courtyard. As long as I'll go into my house to eat my sandwich, it's so good. I'll go into my house. Are we afraid that people are going to make such a mistake? You should know, by the way, people need to realize you can't eat sandwiches, outside of Sukkah throughout the whole Sukkah. Let's say it's Chalamoid Sukkah. It's Chalamoid. It's not the Yom Tov, the first, second day of Yom Tov. And it's Chalamoid. You're at work. You want to have a sandwich. You have to go to a Sukkah. You can't eat bread, a certain amount of bread, outside the Sukkah.
Yeah, so there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay.
What's okay, Mr. Silverman?
To have to go into a sukkah.
You have a mitzvah. Not it's okay. You have to go to the sukkah.
Yeah.
Not allowed. It's forbidden. It's forbidden to have bread. If you can have a certain amount of bread outside the sukkah, it's forbidden. You have to find yourself, and you don't have to. No one tells you on Chalamoid that you have to have a sandwich. You have a salad.
No, you can look forward to having the sandwich in the sukkah doing it.
That's true. That's true.
That's the right way.
Even
that's the real limit.
Right. Even a salad, it's always nice to have it in a sukkah, but you don't have to have your salad in the sukkah. You can have your salad if you need to have the salad outside the sukkah. Of course, it's meritorious to have everything, everything in a sukkah. But there are certain things that have to be done in a sukkah, like a sandwich has to be done in a sukkah. So you have to be careful. You have to know what your diet is during Chalamoid. To be careful not to violate the mitzvah of what certain responsibilities. You can't eat outside the sukkah. So tomorrow we'll continue on this last point. We're almost up to the new Mishnah. I want to wish everyone an easy fast, easy and meaningful. All the best to everybody, and thank you, Mr. Silverman, for joining, and everyone for being here live. We'll continue tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Easy, meaningful, fast. Bye-bye.
You too. Good morning, Mr. Haber. Welcome back. Great to see you. We missed you, Mr. Haber. Good.
Went from,
I think waking up at like 3.
yep, oh goodness. Yeah, that makes sense. You have to do any work today?
Yeah.
Yeah.